Welcome back, part 2, World Series preview, 3-ball walk. Bob, Eddie, Julio. Forgot to introduce you guys, so in case you're watching the second segment and you didn't know who was talking to you in the first, now you know. But we wrapped up. Let's talk about the players. Let's talk about the teams and enough about the weather and the drought and the history behind it and everything like that. But a couple things. Theo Epstein put them together.
Yep.
Where does he stand?
I think if the Cubs win the World Series, he's in the Hall of Fame.
I think he's in either way. I mean, how can you not be in? You took two franchises that hadn't won in 100 years and at least got them to the World Series. I think that's Hall of Fame.
He's a Hall of Fame.
Okay, let's turn it over. In the other dugout, Terry Francona. Where's he stand?
I think he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. You take two teams as managers, and the only thing you think about is how much Theo Epstein probably wishes he got Francona. But
I actually was reading an interview. Do you know when he got the job at the Red Sox, he interviewed two guys? You know who they were?
The two that are in the World Series?
Interviewed Terry Francona. He interviewed Joe Madden. He didn't feel Joe Madden had the experience yet. He liked the way he managed. He liked his originality and the way he was, honestly, with the shifts and everything, his thinking. But he didn't feel he had the experience yet, and he hired Francona. This time around, he went and got Joe Madden, which is really interesting, which is my third. Francona, 2 World Series with the Red Sox, got the Indians in the World Series. Joe Madden, where does he stand?
Well, I think they have to win it.
Yeah, they have to win it.
I think they have to win it at this point. Now, given another few years down the road, if he continues to produce winners, then I'd say
I'll tell you what's amazing. And people look at the Red Sox and the Cubs. Joe Madden took the Tampa Bay Devil Rays to the World Series.
The Rays.
No, they were the Devil Rays.
They were the Devil Rays?
They were the Devil Rays. Took the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And those are the only decent years they had.
Yeah,
that's true.
And he really was. He's an amazing manager. And Francona is so, I think, underrated, and especially when one of the managers you always hear people talk about Hall of Fame is Tony La Russa, who I think did less with more, long term.
You got the jab back on the dot.
It's like Francona has taken the Red Sox to 2 World Series titles, and with any luck, he'll take Cleveland to a title this year. He's a Hall of Fame manager.
Nah, I hope not.
I'll tell you another guy on the same thing with La Russa that always gets mentioned, and I think he's a great man, Lou Piniella.
Oh, Lou Piniella.
And Bobby Cox.
And let me tell you about Lou Piniella, which is kind of coincidentally with the Rays and with the Cubs, who's been there to clean up his mess and take the teams that he had to the World Series.
Yeah,
Joe Madden.
Yeah.
Both teams.
Yeah,
that's a pretty good lineup to follow. Though you could say in the one point that Piniella gets him ready and just can't get him over the hump, and then Joe Madden comes in and reaps the benefits of about 4 years of Pinella's harshness, and he comes in as the good cop, pats him on the back, and then they end up.
And let's look at the field, because I think you touched on something with the players and the Yankee influence and the closers and everything. But I'll tell you what I do like about the Indians more, and we've actually went and polled, and we got a bunch of baseball experts, and Bob's got that for us of the people he polled. But one of the things I want to look at, and we'll get our opinion, then we'll look at everyone else.
Sure.
Is I think one of the big things that comes out in the series, and I see it year in and year out, offense does not win world titles. Pitching does.
pitching wins. Yeah.
And good pitching will do that. And I think the bullpens, especially with the cold weather we talked about, if your starter 5 innings, he's tight and whatever. Yes, one's got Aroldis Chapman. Yes, one got Andrew Miller.
But Andrew Miller's not going to pitch in the 9th.
No.
Not unless the starter goes 8.
No. Right. But I'm just saying from the 5th to the 9th, and Aroldis Chapman isn't going to pitch in the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th.
No.
Maybe an out or two in the 8th.
They were bringing him in for the 8th lately.
But my point is, I think bullpen-wise, with all things being equal, the bullpen's going to make the difference, and the Indians have the bullpen.
We have several people who, when I talk to them, who their big comment was the fact that it's the bullpen that's going to win it for Cleveland. Fred Iso from DeLand, he felt that Miller was better than Chapman, and he thought that the bullpen will win it for Cleveland. Several guys did. Dave Polikoff from Orlando, who's one of the guys. He's probably one of those, not along with you guys, but knowledgeable baseball people I know. He thought the Indians in 6, and he said it's going to be because the bullpen is better than Chicago, and Danny Salazar might be back with Cleveland as well as a starter.
And I'll tell you, the game, they shut down the most prolific, they swept the most prolific offense in all of baseball when they beat the Red Sox in the first round. Okay,
Yeah.
Right.
And the
That was
Cubs,
a short series, though.
What?
Short series, right?
It was a short series. They swept them. Meanwhile, the Cubs struggled against a team that had lost 24 of their last 40 games. The Indians limped into the series and gave the Cubs all they had.
The Indians?
Excuse me, the Giants.
The Giants. Well, of course the Giants would give them all they had because
It
it's
was
an even year.
Okay, but my point
my point at the
is
beginning.
right now the resumes, But I think of all the games, and we talk about Francona and we talk about the best managerial job was when Bauer had the bloody finger and got one out, and Francona put together the bullpen for 9 innings and won the game.
And won the game.
Won the game. And that's what the Indians can do. That I think the
As
Cubs
long as the
with
Indians,
the middle relief.
as long as the Indians are playing in Cleveland,
Why do
he
you
could
say
not
that?
have done that in
That's true.
a
The
National League park.
No, that's true.
Because he would have had to use more relievers.
Yeah. It
Or
would be
else
different.
you'd have to have them
Different.
batting.
That's why National League.
He used 7 relievers.
Well,
But,
No,
only takes one to
remember?
His
Oh, yeah.
bench
No,
would
it
be more
was-
used. His bench would be more used if he was playing in Wrigley, because he'd have to have pinch hitters. He'd have to. The game would be different.
so the starters would have to be out of there, or you'd have to be using your pinch hitters, or a pitcher
the
would have to hit.
point
He did
is,
it, he did it.
he has the bull.
He did it.
He has the bull.
He has a great bullpen.
He
Yeah, but
has,
if you're-
and it's top to bottom.
But if your
including-
if your starters go 7, if you're the Cubs and your starters go 7, then you don't need but one. You don't need but one reliever.
You're absolutely right.
And if you can get to the 8th and you can get to the 9th and Chapman's there, you got to feel good about your
And
chances.
watch what happens with the cold and how the cold affects that.
Yeah, I think it will in some ways. But those guys are in some ways those guys are used to it. They have been pitching in cooler weather as the season has been winding down. It's not like a team.
It's not
from
November.
Southern-
It's not November in
But
Chicago.
still, but it's not a team that's coming from, say, the Marlins, who play indoors every game at home, where they're having to travel up there. Or a team like the California, like the Dodgers, who've been playing in fairly warm, moderate temperatures, and now they're going to have to go to cold. These guys have been slowly staging it down.
No, you're right.
to
Aroldis Chapman's been pitching in below 30-degree weather his whole life.
No.
Well,
He's
his
never-
pro career,
but his
yeah.
I
pro
don't
career
think he
has.
ever. I don't think he has.
Well, he's had to
He
pitch
was in
some.
Cincinnati, New York, and now
Yeah.
he's in
In Cincinnati in late September is not Chicago and Cleveland.
No,
in
it's
November.
not.
No,
but
but it's colder weather.
It's cooler.
Being in Cuba.
Cooler.
Defenses. I think one of the things that people don't talk about much is I think we're going to get to see one of the best defensive World Series that we've seen in a long time because they've just got some serious glove people
They sure
on
do.
both teams.
You do.
I was really impressed, and I don't watch the Cubs because we talked about this before with all the network BS, but Baez really impressed me with Chicago. Well, I watched every game.
And he had a
both.
great series, but he
Good
hasn't
series.
been great all year long. He's been the
Right,
weakest
he's-
guy on their infield all year long. In
Well, when
terms of not
Zobrist
making
plays
the normal
second,
plays.
Right.
Zobrist used to play second quite a bit.
But now Zobrist doesn't have to play second because
Plays
he's playing
left field.
fairly well, so he can play left
Right.
field.
But he's
And-
coming on the right time.
And an internal plug for my son, the organization, the FTB family, and everything like that. But both Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor,
Yep.
both
FTB.
FTB, Florida travel ball kids,
Yep.
and there's 4 of them in the World Series.
Wow.
4 FTB kids in the World Series.
Who's the other one besides Miller?
Andrew Miller is not.
He didn't play FTB, I don't
and,
think.
Really?
and now
He was high school, Buell, Senior
he
Gainesville.
was at
Yeah,
Buell's.
he's a
He's a
Gainesville
local
kid.
kid. I'll have that for you by the end of the.
Yeah.
By the end of the show.
Well,
But, but defenses, any of your guys you pulled say
Yes.
defense will make a difference?
Freddie, so again from Deland said he thought the defense from Cleveland was better, which is why he thought they'd win in 6. And there was one more person here, and I'll get it to you. But several people who felt that Everett Black from here in Gainesville, who watches our program, he said Cubs in 6. He thinks they're due, but the one thing he said, several people said they thought the pressure might get to Chicago. Everett didn't think so. Everett thinks that because of Joe Madden's influence, that they're playing one game at a time and they're not going to just fold because of any kind of 70-year-old or 180-year-old pressure.
Well, I think anytime you start looking at defense, you got to look up the middle. So you got to start behind the dish, and I give that nod to the Cubbies catchers, both of them.
Yeah.
Better defensively, better offensively as well. Then you go up the middle. You got pretty much a push there. I think you got Kipnis, who's better than Baez overall,
Yep.
and you got Russell and Lindor. You can flip a coin on that one and have either way that you want to land on it. So I think that's almost a push up the middle. And then you go to center field, and I think that's the Cubs have a better outfielder in Dexter Fowler than either one of the two guys that are going to play in the lefty versus righty platooning for center field for the Indians. So for me, up the middle, I lean the other way from them and think the Cubs are probably slightly better up the middle than they are. And then you throw in Bryant at third base, and I'm sorry, but I think he's just the MVP candidate. So I think you have to go there with him, and then you go to first base, and Napoli's a great pickup. But Rizzo has had a great year. And so for me, I think the Cubs are a better defensive team than the Indians. So I'm sorry to disagree with our listeners.
Charles Aguirre, who watches our program, he thought the Cubs in 6 because he thought batting and defense for Chicago was going to make the crowd over. And one other person that watches a lot is Scott Pfeiffer from here in Gainesville. He thought Indians in 6. It's really amazing how almost nobody thinks that the World Series is going to go 7 games. Everybody thinks it's going to go 6 or less games. But he was the person who thought Francona was going to be a difference in the World Series for the Cubs because they've been consistent all year, and that the pressure would get to Chicago. Rick Wingert from Clearwater, because of the bullpen, he picked the Indians in 6. And Joseph Perez, who watches our show, very, very good baseball fan. Cubs in 6, he thinks that all year long they've been very consistent. They've just got too good of pitching, batting, and they're good in the clutch. And one last person. Well, and one last person, Steve Russell, who is the sports director on WRUF, he said Cubs in 6. They've been the best team all year. He thinks Cleveland's got great pitching, but if the Cubs can pitch in close games, he thinks Chicago can pull it off.
I think it's good. I think Russell's pretty close there. And I tell you, the one wild card in this whole matchup from players, we've got about 3 minutes left, is Jason Hayward.
Oh.
If Hayward can just find a bat, I mean, if he can find Serrano and get him to bless the bat,
you guys are funny.
Then he's the guy. I mean, he is the difference maker in that lineup if he can get it going, because then you have a feared bat from that left-handed side.
And the defense.
Well, defense is going to play either way, but offensively, you got to have some contribution.
But he didn't play the game against Los Angeles. They won 5-0. He was on the pine.
They benched him.
They benched him. And Dave Zona, who is a big Boston Red Sox fan, he thought that Indians in 7. He was the one person who picked Indians 7. He thinks it's just Cleveland's year.
Overall, how did it come out?
7-5. 12 people who we were able to contact. 7-5 Indians.
And before we go with our view here in the last minute and a half and give our opinion, I'll answer that question. Francisco Lindor, Albert Almora, Javi Baez, and Addison Russell. Right there.
Addison Russell.
FTB family in the World Series, which is absolutely
one last person who came.
Absolutely
Charles
amazing.
Burford from here in Gainesville, Cubs in 6. He thinks their hitting has come alive, and he thinks that's going to carry him through. And it did come alive in the Dodgers series when they were at 2-1. When they were down 2-1.
Well, I think if it goes to a Game 7, I think the pressure goes back to Cleveland more than the Cubs.
Playing at home,
Game 7, with everything on the line. So I think that plays into the Cubs' hands if it goes in there.
So it's 2-3-2, correct?
That's right.
2-3-2.
Okay. So who do you think?
I think the Cubs are going to win it. I think they'll win it. I'm gonna go a game earlier. I think they win it in 5. I think they jump up and win Game 1. And if they win Game 2, it's over. They might sweep. They might actually sweep them.
I agree. I think that if they win the first 2 games in Cleveland, it's over.
I totally agree.
I think that they sweep them because I just don't think. I just think their defense, and I think if they can get a lead and bring Chapman in, I wouldn't be surprised to see Joe Madden actually bring him in the 7th if he has to in any of the games. But I just think it's Chicago. I hate sports people who go, I told you this, I predicted that. Local sports people on radio, but I felt, as we talked about in the preseason or spring training, I just had a feeling it was the Cubs' year, and I just think this is it.
I agree with you both in that the Cubs are the best team in baseball. I agree with you both that if the Cubs win the first 2 games in Cleveland, the series is over. However,
but you don't
they're
think
not going to win the first 2 games in Cleveland.
Maybe not.
And because of that, I think when you break down the game into a small game, which is what happens with pinch hitters, with defense, with relief pitching, with starters going 5 or 6, the cold weather entering into it, I think that Terry Francona will outmanage Joe Maddon. And all year I've been sitting there saying, Joe Maddon, Joe Maddon, Joe Maddon.
Yep.
I think Terry Francona will show he is a Hall of Famer. I think his team is a better team, especially in the bullpen, and the bullpen's where it's going to come down.
And you know, I will say this: I don't think it's going to be a sweep, but if they win 1 in Cleveland, I think they win all 3 in Chicago. So I think it's going to be 5. Is what I think.
Well, we'll see who's right here, Mr. In the Middle guy. He couldn't pull for the Cubs if there was nobody else playing. If the Cubs were playing a bye, he would choose the bye.
I had the Cubs. I don't like the Mets. I had the Cubs in '69.
Yeah.
And see where it got.
And see where he got it. And those of you who don't know, he's a St. Louis Cardinals fan.
Cardinals fan.
So therefore, he cannot pick the Cubs. In all honesty, so go watch the games this week. Should be a great time. We'll know where we are next week. We'll be able to come back and talk.
One thing before we close, okay? And you're right, but me going with an American League team is even trumps the going to Cubs.
Real baseball.
They don't.
But they're going to win it all.
And that's going to be the difference. That's going to be the difference. Real baseball.
Well, they've got World Series experience. They were there 19 years ago.
And the only reason we're talking about them playing at home is because the American League won the All-Star game. So there you go, fans. It's a triple thing for them. They don't like any of that.
No.
We'll see you next week.
Hey, enjoy the World Series.
Ball.